You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christie Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, and welcome to the fourth expert interview for this month's series on marriage, intimacy, and mental health. I'm joined today by Dr. Christie Kederian. Dr. Christie is a renowned relationship expert who specializes in helping clients create lives they love and find love they deserve. With an extensive career as a professional matchmaker and relationship expert for eHarmony and Match.com affiliate company, Dr. Christie has helped thousands of people create lives they love and find the love they deserve. She is a triple Trojan, receiving her bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees at the University of Southern California in psychology and marriage and family therapy. She also coaches therapists on how to build an online business and is a professional speaker and provides trainings with the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. Dr. Christie has been featured on ABC, NBC, KTLA, and the Washington Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, Cosmopolitan, and many more. She lives in California with her husband, and she recently welcomed her first baby. Congratulations. This is a very exciting time for her. So on this episode, we discuss matchmaking. What is it? What isn't it? How does it work? I ask all the questions that you want to ask when you're watching television and you're watching matchmaking shows. I ask Dr. Christie about hot topics like, do opposites really attract? What is chemistry? What really are the hardest years in marriage? And what are those relationship red flags we should all be looking for? We also discuss self-awareness and best practices for maintaining a healthy, loving relationship. And if you are hearing this in real time before 12 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, June 28th, head over to sasssays.com/panel to sign up to join us live and talk with Dr. Christie, Dr. Lexx, and Dr. Morgan all about attachment theory, sexuality, relationships, and mental health. All right, here's Dr. Christie. Hey, Dr. Christie. So nice to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. So great to be here, Christie.
Let's get right into it. I want to know, you're a triple Trojan, bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees in mental health. Why? Why pursue mental health?
Yeah, such a great question. So I feel like I've kind of from a young age been someone that just loves people. So I've always, initially when I grew up, I wanted to be a journalist because I loved hearing the stories. And now looking back as a therapist, I'm like, maybe I liked that someone was calm when there was like chaos going around behind them. Like they could just be calm. And I'm like, that really levels out as a therapist. And when I started my degree, I studied psychology and music industry. So I always feel like I've been like an integrator. I love seeing the intersection of things. So I took a course in marriage and family therapy in my undergrad, did some research in the marriage and family lab at USC. And it made so much sense to me. Family therapy, like how your family, your culture, and for me individually, I'm Armenian. My faith background is Christian. So I saw how those things really impacted my identity and through my family, through my community. So when I took that class and I researched, I was like, yes, this makes sense. Who we are is a result and in context of relationships is really what I wanted to look at. So kind of dove in from there. My doctorate's in actually organizational psychology. So again, it's more of the intersection between therapy and like business
Mm.
and organizations and leadership. So I just love seeing how mental health issues and topics play out in basically every aspect of our lives and communicating that to people and what I do today.
Yeah, I love that, and that is without all of the degrees, kind of what I'm trying to do, like,
Totally.
and I do appreciate though what you've done with your platforms and your business, because what I'm really having a hard time doing, and I'm getting clearer on it, is like narrowing it down. Like, I'm so interested in how mental health impacts like everything, and that's why I kind of want to started these series by category, because I'm like, I want to know it all, so I need to start
Yeah.
to like
Hone
fine
it
tune
down.
this
Yeah,
a little
totally.
bit. Yeah, because it's like the ripple effect
Yeah.
in everything.
Mhm.
It's so funny. I actually interviewed another Armenian American this
Oh,
morning.
cool. Awesome.
Amalia, she's a therapist.
Oh, yeah, I know
I
her.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
interviewed her this morning. What a small
love
world.
it. All the Armenians.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what that means, but it's probably something for me. Um,
Love it.
okay, so well, speaking of that, I noticed on your social media today that you launched Armenian Matchmaking.
Ah, I'm so excited.
Say more. Like, why specifically Armenian Matchmaking?
Yeah, so it's actually something we have been offering to my former coaching clients that also were Armenian, but my background I actually worked as a matchmaker, so it's really a big part of my career. I started working for eHarmony about it's almost been like it's like 7 years ago as a professional matchmaker. So they at the time had like a matchmaking service that was part of their dating service. So it's like if you signed up for eHarmony, but you wanted more of like a individualized approach,
Hmm,
then we were a team of therapists there would basically search and vet out, get to know our clients really well, and then vet out, kind of go on the dates for our clients and then match them, but from a psychology perspective. So it was like we were asking some of
fascinating.
those deeper questions.
Mhm.
And seeing if they were compatible because eHarmony's research and their platform is just all about compatibility. So from there, I just loved matchmaking. I worked with another company that affiliated with other dating sites. So I kind of saw the inside of like Match.com, OkCupid, all of these sites. And when I branched out on my own, I really felt empowered to connect those two things. So it was like the therapy world and the strategy and matchmaking. And it's like if people just kind of knew a little bit about what goes on inside these algorithms, that might change the game for them and really
Hmm,
help them find love. So a big part of our company has been just really helping specifically single women find love. And then I kind of took a step away from doing matchmaking, but some of the Armenian clients, because I attract a lot of them and I am Armenian. And so I have a lot of followers and a platform there. I have worked with past clients on just like actually matching them with people. But now we're in a space, our team's expanded where we can take on more people and not just clients and kind of help with them with like coaching, figure out what they really want, and then actually connecting them with people. Our culture really has, it's built for that because it's all about connection, community. A lot of people, like even my parents were, it wasn't, she's not an official matchmaker, but they were introduced by somebody. So that was a role that, a lot of the like moms or matriarchal figures in our culture kind of took on like, oh, okay, let's
interesting.
kind of connect, set up people, and not like quite arranged marriage, but more just like we know their family and you guys it might be a good fit.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's really a great need. I've got a lot of people asking for it and a great opportunity to just kind of connect through somebody and another approach to dating essentially that might be something that could help people.
Okay. And so just to clarify, is the idea that you are matching Armenians with Armenians? Is that yeah.
Mostly some of the people that wanna work with us are people that wanna meet other Armenians, but we're
Okay.
open to working with any Armenians, and if that's not a priority for them, we can still match them, yeah.
Okay.
But
Okay.
a lot of times it's, like, people that want to meet other Armenians but don't really know, like, how or where, and hopefully we'll be expanding that beyond that, but for now, because we have the matches, the people, the
And the
community, we're
want for it, right? Yeah.
totally, yeah, we're niching down for now.
Cool, cool, cool. Okay. So my experience with matchmaking comes from two wildly different experiences.
Ah,
One is like my millennialism is showing of like E and Bravo and watching
oh
Patty
yeah.
Sanger on Millionaire Matchmaker.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other is in college I was on Match, which
Oh, okay.
it sounds funny to me now that
Yeah,
I
when you
did
look
that.
back.
Um yeah, but I was just like I wanted a relationship so
Mhm.
badly, that felt more appropriate than, like, going to bars, which I
Yeah,
did
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
also, yeah.
yeah, but anyway, I'm curious, are there some misconceptions? I'm sure there are, like, what do we get wrong about matchmaking? Perhaps maybe we should just start with, like, how do you define matchmaking?
Totally. Yeah. So for how we do it and how I've done it in the past, matchmaking is essentially like allowing somebody else to really understand you, get to know you, and connect you with somebody directly, and almost make that like decisions like a friend, but that's more of an expert that's seen some patterns that knows what could click with you or not. So you almost get that like insight from someone. So it's not just like in Armenian, like, it's not just like your grandma matchmaking you, like, this person's single, this person's single.
Okay,
It's like
yeah.
we have a little bit more insight into you and who you are, what you're looking for. We take those considerations in mind and then connect you directly with someone that's going to go on a date. There's no ghosting involved.
Mhm,
It's that in personal touch. And then what we also provide throughout the process is obviously that insight and expert perspective, as well as after the dates, they get what we call post-date feedback. So we check in with the person they went on the date with, as well as individual, and kind of just see how the date go. Like what happened, how'd you perceive this person?
hmm,
All of that feedback is so helpful because sometimes you go on dates and maybe people tell you why it wasn't a good fit, but you just don't really know, and you're like,
yeah.
why do I always go on a first date but I never get a second date, or whatever the pattern is for you? So we found that that is so valuable because if there is some kind of pattern, something you can just tweak in the dating process. A lot of times people think, I should just naturally know how to date, but the reality is dating is a skill like anything else. So maybe there are just aspects of you that you're not allowing to come forth on the dates that are keeping you, the right person, from seeing who you truly are. So we help in that process and use that feedback to then help you become better dater and just be able to show more of who you are to the potential right person.
It feels a little bit like you're getting couples counseling in separate rooms.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think like, and especially, I'm a big fan and, I learned from a lot from working at eHarmony and Dr. Neil Clark Warren's work. But essentially, when he created eHarmony, which is one of the first dating apps out there, he was trying to reduce the divorce rate. Essentially,
Yeah.
he was a couples therapist, and I, had this experience too. And you see these couples that are paired together, and you're like, maybe if they had these tools ahead of time, they might have seen that they're not really compatible and might have avoided being in this room in the first place. So, ideally, kind of doing that work ahead of time can help avoid problems later on, because there are some aspects from research that we found that are really important when it comes to compatibility. And you want to set yourself up for success, obviously, in marriage.
Mhm, mhm. And if there was something that I mean, maybe you do with your clients, but what's something that you just want people to take away from this as far as like what matchmaking isn't? Like,
Yeah.
what are the expectations that we're getting wrong about it?
Yeah. Well, I think especially a misconception is that, I am a vending machine that can kind of just like, okay, you put in your order, 6'5", tall, dark, handsome, Ivy League educated. And then, I give you
Right.
some
Like you're
money.
not like a sperm donor.
Yeah,
That's like
exactly. It's like it's not
right.
that. I'm not a magician.
Right.
Some people think I am, but I'm not. So we're not, if you feel like you've been like dating and you're just like really not finding the right person, we are not just put in your Amazon Prime order, we'll get it to you the next day. We're really going to look at some deeper patterns and notice, okay, if you do really want something in a potential partner, why is that? Like, what's the why? It doesn't mean that you shouldn't want that, but you have to really
Mm.
understand, what is your why, and then sometimes people have these misconceptions about what will be a good fit for them, who will be a good fit, what qualities, but that might have just been, what your parents thought or or society thinks, and maybe that's not really the best fit for you. So we, because of our expertise and being in this, I've worked with thousands of people in coaching and matchmaking and therapy capacities. We are really just kind of going to give you that objective perspective, like, okay, that's great. If you really want this thing, amazing. And what other things are you willing to kind of negotiate around or reprioritize if this thing is really the most important to you? So it's really about, you have done the work, you've tried, and you're noticing some blocks, and you're open to learning and getting feedback about what you are wanting if that's not working anymore. So a lot of people see matchmaking as more of the transactional thing to do rather than,
Mm.
work with a coach or whatever. Like, okay, I'm giving this money, like, give me my soulmate. But in order to create a good relationship, and I've seen this a lot in a lot of couples, like, I give them exactly what they're looking for, but the relationship still doesn't blossom, doesn't go anywhere, or there's some self-sabotage going on. So you really want to work through some of those things before, so you're not, when you do meet that person, you're not ruining the potential for a great relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is, I mean, I'm sure that's like so ridiculous to you doing what you do, but like, I'm just thinking back to that show and like that feels like the
Oh,
exact
yeah.
problem was that
Yeah.
there were people on there, aside from I'm sure like production and like the
Yeah,
fact that it
yeah.
was a television show, but like that felt like the problem a lot of the
Yeah,
time is
totally.
that you just had people there for the transaction
Yeah,
and like
totally.
thinking that they were going to go on and this matchmaker is going to guarantee love like that.
Mhm.
There's still something about like energy and
Yeah,
emotion that a person on paper is not going to be able to say,
totally.
here you go.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true, and I think it makes for good TV, but in
Yeah.
reality, it's not gonna make for happy marriages.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've said, compatibility a lot. Like is is it safe to say there's science behind compatibility? Like what tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a lot of the research, and obviously this is an area that a lot more research is needed. It's kind of in the field of social psychology, but with dating apps, there's been a lot more research done because we're like trying to see, okay, what is this new way of dating, getting technology in the mix? How is that impacting us as people, impacting our relationships? So when it comes to compatibility, a lot of the research I, base my work off of is from Dr. Neil Clark Warren, and it's really about some of the misconceptions people have. One of my favorite ones to debunk is the belief that, opposites attract. And I think
Mm.
there's definitely a component of that. Opposites definitely do attract, but they don't necessarily stay together for the long run. So what they found from a research perspective is actually the more similar you are to a potential partner in really important ways, the better your likelihood of having a healthy, long lasting relationship. And so I think there is obviously room for that like complementary approach, but especially in certain areas, one that was found was spiritual harmony, your background, so like education background, how you were raised, a lot of these factors. Often, the more similar you are, the better your results are. Because I think that what it really has to do with is there's less potential for conflict if you understand kind of where each other are
Mm.
coming from a little bit more.
Mhm.
And I think that is really portrayed also around money, for example. Like, he really is a big proponent of having very similar beliefs about money, finances, what to do with it, how you're raised, because we see in the statistics around divorce, that's one of the number one reasons, or one number one things that get in the way. So I think I always say, marriage is hard enough. So if you can be on the same page about a lot of these deeper core values, you're setting yourself up for more success. The way that he puts it is like you're putting like deposits into your bank account instead of
Mm.
taking out and getting into debt. The more different you are, the more kind of in debt you are in your
Mhm.
relationship, the harder it is to kind of come to that green zone, so to speak. But the more credits you have, even as differences and challenges along your life's path come up, you're able to draw from those deposits of being more similar in how you want to approach as you go through life.
Hmm. Yeah, it's making me think because I don't have too many friends, still like very actively dating.
Yeah.
But not too long ago, I can remember sitting at dinner tables, like pre-COVID, obviously, but like
Mhm.
sitting down and listening to my friends who were still dating and having the thought that, you know, while you're while you're dating, you tend to work out the big stuff, right? Like you work out if you're a smoker or non-smoker, or you want kids or you don't want kids, or if your religions don't jive. Like it ends up being, if we look further down, like you were speaking of dating. Now, if I think about, when we sit at those dinners and I talk about it with my friends, it's like it seems to me then when I look at my own marriage, the other marriages that I know of that have been going on, it's like it feels like it's then becomes about the little things again.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
to your point, if those like big things are not on track, like you could be in big trouble, but then
Yeah.
it feels like it shifts. It goes back to like morning person, night person,
Yeah.
like, like things
Totally.
that are feel small, but they happen every day. So they're big.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we also know from a research perspective is that around like 70% of the things that you fight about never get resolved. So a lot of those, not to
That's
discourage
like
anyone
that
here,
actually, no,
but
that's good. That's good
yeah,
to
a
know,
lot
right?
of
Like,
yeah, because a lot of those things, like those little differences that get like annoy you, and maybe when you first start dating, you're like, "Oh, it's not a big deal," or "Oh, that's kind of cute," like the
yeah,
quirks, and then now you're like, "These things drive me crazy."
yeah.
Um, those things often never resolve. So what I often say is it's kind of like learning how to adapt and get to that place of more acceptance. And one of the qualities that is a lesser known quality I'll say that people look for or think about in a potential partner is what I call like agreeability or like flexibility. I think you definitely want to date someone and be someone, like work on that on yourself, that's not super rigid, that can kind of roll with the punches, that wants to work with you. They're kind of like a team player. That's a really important thing to look for because, well, yeah, you're going to change throughout life. Things are going to come up. So even if you're fully aligned and similar and you guys are completely the same on so many things, but you or your partner is super rigid, it's not going to be that way forever. So that's going to be hard to work with someone who is really rigid. And if you're really rigid, learning more about that flexibility and being agreeable can help you kind of get over those little waves. So you're not kind of like, drowning in a puddle.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I like that. So, flexibility. What are some other qualities or, things we could be working on to, enhance the quality of our relationships?
Yeah. So the big, C word of communication, I think that's definitely something that people can always be working on. And I think, in today's day and age, I'm sure it's always been like this, but just don't underestimate the value of kindness
Mm,
towards like your partner, towards yourself, and compassion. People are going through so many things, and even your partner, you guys sleep next to each other every night, but you don't know fully what's going on for them. And I think like just kind of looking from that lens of like kindness or like what can I do for this person, speaking their love language, all of those
mhm,
things can go a really long way and can often take the pressure off. Maybe there's that like one issue you guys always fight about. Like if you kind of take this counter approach and work on, okay, how can I be more kind and compassionate and just meet my partner here in these ways? Maybe that problem will kind of dissipate or you'll view the problem a different way. Sometimes people can get really hyper focused on that one thing that then it like kind of discolors everything in the relationship rather than focusing on the positive things or working towards those positive things on your own, and then allowing that to like just be resolved too. So I think oftentimes, and when I work with couples, I say this all the time, it's like, there's always something you can be working on individually that can improve the relationship, even if you perceive your partner's problem as being the big problem or the main thing and they need to change and whatever. You can always work on your side of the street in some way. So I always encourage people to, if they kind of feel that they turn inwards and try to do that work, and see if that has a result that maybe you weren't even expecting.
yeah. I didn't start therapy because of my relationship. I started because I was pregnant with my second and just like completely overwhelmed with life. But I remember saying to my therapist at one point early on, as of course things with my relationship would come up, I would say to her, is it enough that I'm the only one in therapy? Is it
Mhm.
enough that I'm the only one doing work? And of course, she had her ways of answering me without answering me that
Yeah.
made me answer her. And over time I could see how, yeah, totally. Because just things that I would change about maybe the way I respond or the way I just learned how much of what I thought he was doing was
Mhm.
really just how I was receiving it.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, yeah.
So it
That
makes a
is
big
so
difference. And I would just add to that. Um, I then could see it start working, but then I moved to this sort of like resentment of like, well, why do I have to do all this work?
right. Totally. Yeah.
But then you continue to see it work and you're like, "Well, okay, I don't
Yeah.
care. It's just working," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Just
And it
keep
just makes
going.
you feel better. I think the
Yes, totally.
resentment is often that key killer to the person who's doing more of the work,
Mhm.
but when you kind of release that, then you can see, "Oh, wow, I actually feel better, the relationship's doing better, everything's better." We, like,
Yeah,
underestimate our power in that way.
yeah, and then it really just becomes so empowering, and I don't it's so, I don't mean it to sound petty or immature or anything, but, like, there are times where I just if I'm frustrated in my relationship or something and I just am like, I'll sit there and be like, "All right, I'll fix it." Like, in my head, I'm just like, "All right, I'll go to therapy and I'll fix it myself and we'll just be fine," you know? I mean, it's simplified, but it speaks to the trust that I have in myself to
Yeah,
adapt and
yeah.
know, thankfully, that when I adapt, I have the experience now of knowing my partner, he comes along for the ride.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll make the caveat too that this does not apply to like abusive relationships or anything like
Yes,
that.
thank you.
This is more of just some of those little things that you notice, okay, I keep getting annoyed with the same thing and I snap or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like, okay, how can I just really be mindful? Like, yeah, that's my experience. So you're not abandoning your own experience and challenges and taking it to therapist, working on it so you're not like just stuffing it. Because I
yeah,
think that's the difference. Sometimes people feel like, "Oh, well, I can't do anything to change it, so I'm gonna stuff or distract myself or just, like, disconnect," and then that doesn't help the relationship, it doesn't help you. So it's really about kind of, "Okay, how can I process through this, um, and make myself just really integrate and be more at peace as well as improve the relationship dynamic?"
yeah. Okay, I wanna talk about chemistry. What does chemistry mean?
Yeah, great question. I think honestly, a lot of people just believe different things about what it means. For me, and there's actually a lot of research. The work of Helen Fisher is great to look into. I can send that to you all for the show notes. But she's an anthropologist, and she talks about how, and there's actual studies about how our actual like pheromones give off like what our DNA and our chemistry is that connects with somebody else. So it's
Huh,
actually something that we are physiologically giving off to connect with somebody or
interesting.
not connect with somebody. But I think the way that a lot of people understand it is that they have this like spark or instant connection with somebody that they don't have to work at or can't really explain. It's just this like kind of vague thing that happens or doesn't happen. And so I think in some ways that's true. And I think sometimes we way overvalue that thing,
Yeah,
and kind of either just give up everything else or we overvalue it and we don't look at other qualities and we don't wait for that connection to evolve, even if it doesn't happen so instantaneously as it might have done in the past or as you might imagine it. A lot of times people just have never experienced this thing and it's this like elusive, oh, I just never like that person. I'm like, well, have you experienced that in the past? And they just never have that experience. So they're kind of basing it off of some
yeah,
hypothetical experience that maybe you see in the movies that you think, "Oh, I
mhm,
still haven't felt it yet," but we don't really know what it is because it's different for everybody.
yeah. Yeah, it's like people are always like, "Well, when you know," and
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
finding that, like, so frustrating. I'm like, "Will I though?"
Yeah, I'm
Like
like, "What about us with anxiety? We
yeah,
never know anything."
Yes, exactly. Or I think, even thinking about chemistry and like you said, like overvaluing it, it's like you might have great chemistry with someone, but it doesn't mean you won't have great chemistry with someone else.
Right. So true. Yeah. And it could feel different. I often, a big part of the work that I do, even in the coaching and matchmaking, is kind of bringing on therapeutic concepts and kind of our attachment and how we grew up and how we see our
Right.
parents relationship, how that impacts who we're connected to. A lot of this is subconscious. So you might feel like, yeah, we just click. I don't know why. And it might actually because they feel really familiar, sometimes in unhealthy ways
Mhm.
or healthy ways, to your parental dynamic that you witnessed and that attachment. So it's really about being super aware. And usually, if it's an intangible thing, you can't really describe it. I don't know why, then there's probably some sort of subconscious element that you might want to look at.
Okay. Okay. So sticking with that, what I mean, it's related, but not entirely related. What are some relationship red flags?
Yeah. So, I think oftentimes for people, there's some general ones that from my perspective have more to do with like characterological defects. So it's like, they might have a personality disorder. And so these are some signs, love bombing,
Mm,
narcissistic traits. Like these are some general signs to look out for if they have a personality disorder. So there's that one category of red flags that I think across the board, everyone should see these signs and say, not a good fit. Um, Also, some signs that are red, but maybe a little bit of a different shade, maybe towards orange, are like they might be a little bit emotionally unavailable. They're not like fully like no off the limits, but you do want to kind of notice some of those patterns and figure out pretty early on if there is potential for improvement
okay.
around those patterns. And then there are things that call more just like personal red flags. So for you personally, because of
Mm,
your experiences, your personality, your upbringing, whatever, is just like not a fit, cannot connect with this type of person. And those things could be like one person comes to me with their story and experience, and I'll say, that's not really a red flag for you, but somebody else comes and I'm like, yeah, that's red flag, like not a good fit for you. So it's really about knowing yourself too and what dynamics are healthy for you to be engaged in and what aren't.
okay. Okay. And I think I know the answer to this, but what can someone maybe at home right now start to do to figure out what some of those things are for
Mhm.
themselves? I don't know the
Yes.
answer. I was going to ask you a different question and now
Yeah.
switch gears. I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah. So I would say looking at your like past relationships or people you've been attracted to in the past is a good place to start, because if you find that you're consistently attracted to the type of person who kind of makes you feel like unimportant or not worthy or not good enough, if you're in like situationships, um, whatever, um, then you want to pay attention to that. So it's like right away off the bat, if someone's not showing that they're connected, engaged, you're waiting by the phone, seeing if they're going to actually plan a date or call you, that right away, red flag, because on your based on your pattern that you're consistently looking for this like approval or validation from people who aren't giving it to you. So that's some stuff you need to like work on maybe from childhood or whatever, because you're getting signs from someone that they don't view you as important, valuable right off the bat, and then you start internalizing that. And often what happens for people in that situation is that they try to work harder. So they just are like, oh, okay, like what do I need to do to be good enough for this person? And that's a dynamic you want to stay really far away from if you know that that's something you struggle with. So I would say really looking at your like past, your internal beliefs that have come from childhood. And doesn't mean you had a difficult childhood. Oftentimes people think like, oh, I had a fine childhood, I shouldn't be attracting emotionally unavailable people. But the reality is like there are always things and needs that you had as a kid that were misattuned to. There were beliefs that you internalized that weren't the truth. And so you really have to look at those things and say, where is this really coming from? Have the awareness and notice if there's any patterns. And then that will really help you say, like, yeah, I just need to fully stay away from someone like this or in this doing this thing or whatever.
Okay. Okay. All right. I want to switch gears for a moment. What is your stance on the idea that the first year of marriage is the most difficult?
Yeah. I mean, I think People have different beliefs about, the first year, the 7-year itch, these
Yeah.
sorts of dynamics. And I do think that an element of the first year is very challenging, which is like you're trying to kind of meld your life with somebody else. And that is very difficult. Especially if you've not lived together before, things like that. That's definitely a challenge. Although there is also research that if you live together before you were married, the likelihood of divorce like spikes, which is really fascinating
Wait,
because
if you
people think
lived
like,
together
oh,
before?
yeah, your likelihood of divorce is like much more than if you didn't, which I
Really?
find really fascinating. Yeah, because there's certain dynamics I think that they discovered that when you're learning all these things about somebody, your first year of marriage, these new things, you're already committed, so you're willing to kind of work through some of those things. Versus, I think sometimes if you live together, you're already kind of living life together. Some of those difficulties and challenges already arise. So if there's additional conflicts later on when you're married, it might just be like, this is the end of the rope here for us. And, we can't work
Mm.
through those things. Um, so yeah, very fascinating study about that. But one of the things that I often say is like, okay, if you are looking for, ways that you can kind of create your life together, then that likelihood is going to go down way more in the first year. So it's like, how can I adjust? And like I mentioned before, adaptability, flexibility. How can I kind of like work with somebody here to create our life together? So it's not like either it's my way or your way. It's like, what's our joint way? So having that approach in the first year, I think is really helpful. But yeah, I think it really depends on the type of relationship when you're married. Like, why are you getting married? Are you very clear on those reasons? Have you gone to couples therapy or premarital counseling? Like, have you kind of worked through and know what your issues are? I focus more on like the awareness. Obviously, like I said, not everything gets resolved and
Mhm.
sometimes ever in the relationship, but it's more like, are you aware? Do you guys have a healthy pattern of working through when this comes up? That increases your likelihood of that not being a very difficult first year if you've done the work beforehand to know why you're choosing this person.
Yeah. It's interesting. My partner and I lived together for many years before we were married, and I can see how I was less willing to push the envelope on certain
Mhm.
dynamics
Mhm.
until we were married.
You're right. Yeah.
But I think that now, hindsight's 2020, but like I actually think the first year with kids was the hardest.
Hardest. Yeah, I can see that too. Because I think that probably you guys were in that dynamic for a long time. And when kids come, it creates a whole different dynamic. And
Yeah.
I often wonder if that 7-year itch, it depends on when you're married. Obviously, people are getting married later and later. So the kids are coming sooner to the
Mhm.
marriage. But I think from the past research, I think that 7 years probably around the time you're first having kids if you got married like earlier.
Mhm.
And then that like, impacting a lot of things because it's like you already have your issues, you know them. And then when you bring another person
Yeah.
into the dynamic, it's like, oh
Yeah.
boy, yeah.
Yeah, like we were always like just super in sync. And I think that the things that I was not willing to push the envelope on, I actually accepted them
Mhm.
until the responsibilities on my plate grew by a whole
Ooh,
human.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
It was like, sure, I'll fold your
I'll do this.
laundry.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll make you a sandwich.
Yeah.
Now it's like I have a whole person I am feeding 20 hours out of 24 a day. Like, make your own sandwich, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? Like,
So true. Yeah. Hmm.
and to be fair to him, he's looking at me like, "What do you mean? You've been making me sandwiches for 8 years." And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
"Not
Hmm.
anymore," you know?
Anymore, yeah. So true, yeah, it's and that's where that flexibility, I think, comes in again. It's like if
Yeah.
you can do that early on, then you're gonna be better like, you can grow together later as new people and things enter your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I do appreciate that we had so much time together before we had kids, even though we got pregnant within our first year of marriage, but we were together for a long
Long
time.
time, yeah, totally.
So there was a lot of like history
Yeah, yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
trust before I was looking at him going, make your own sandwiches,
Yeah, yeah.
dude. And not that that was easy for him
Yeah,
and for us to navigate because obviously it wasn't just sandwiches, it was about a lot of other things.
yeah.
But anyway. Okay. All right. So just in the last few minutes that I have you here, is there anything about what we've talked about or your work that, is kind of like what you'd want to be your main like takeaway or drive home point? What do you want people to walk away remembering?
Yeah, I think it's really about that. Like I always say, it's the awareness. So, like, knowing yourself really well is the key to that, those healthy relationships, attracting them, building them, creating them. I think that's the second piece. It's like just feeling empowered that you can really create and have so much impact on the relationship dynamic. If you have that awareness, you're working through accepting those things in yourself and your partner and other people, and then you're taking that action that's best aligned with who you are. So I think those three things are really the pillars of my work, and I think as people kind of focus on working more on themselves, will be helpful to them, throughout your life.
Okay. And just because you mentioned it, I will put a ton of links in the show notes, but what are some of the ways that people can work with you and your team?
Sure. Yeah. So we have basically three levels of working with us in business and relationships. So there's like individual coaching and individual matchmaking. So if you need that more like customized personal approach, we help in those ways. And then we have our group program, that our Find the One group program is primarily for singles, successful women that are like, I have this success in every area of my life, but for some reason it's not translating to dating. That program really kind of goes through that. The community is amazing. You get a lot of support there. There is some individual, but it's mostly group. And then we have our courses as well that you can kind of do more on a self-study basis. So all that info is on my website, which I'll share with you. And then
Okay.
yeah, we have our new matchmaking launching too.
Cool, cool, cool. All right. Well, Christy, so very strange to me. Thank you so much. I don't know. I agree with you. It's so interesting to kind of see all the overlaps of mental health and self-work. And I appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, I'm obsessed. Obviously, it helps that her name is Christy, but I'm just so fascinated by all of the things Dr. Christy had to share. I love this conversation. And by now, I know you know the drill. Check back in on Friday for my detailed thoughts and reflections. And I'll remind you again, if you are hearing this in real time before 12 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, June 28th, 2023, head over to sasssays.com/panel to sign up and join us live. Dr. Christy will be there along with Dr. Lexx and Dr. Morgan to talk all about relationships and mental health. And if you are hearing this after 12 p.m. on June 28th, I still encourage you to head over to sasssays.com/panel, sign up, and I will send you the replay. Exciting stuff. Hope to see you there. Check back in on Friday. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.